Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Father Chris Collins here, Vice President for Mission, and being joined again, fortunately, by Rabbi Avi Olitzky. And it's great to have you back. And we're looking forward to a little conversation about Passover these days. So,
thanks, Father Chris.
Yeah, thank you. So, like we've done before, maybe you could just lay out a little bit of whatever you'd like to do. Some of the history, the grounding, the context
Sure.
of what Passover, as we refer to Passover frequently. Maybe you have some distinctions about that.
Sure. So the Hebrew name for the festival is Pesach. And as some people may have read in a piece that I wrote recently, that Passover is a name that was eventually given in an English translation of the Bible. And yet it probably doesn't fully describe not only what the word Pesach means or the holiday itself. So I think the best place for us to start is to give a little bit of background and perhaps significance, because Passover as a festival, as a Jewish festival, is one of the few festivals that's observed in real time. So what do I mean? There are two pinnacle moments in the Exodus narrative that the holiday itself identifies and observes and celebrates. The first moment, if you will, is the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. And the second pinnacle moment.
Maybe I could interrupt you just to back up a little bit. Tell us about what the Exodus narrative is.
Sure. So the Israelites, my ancestors, right? The ancestors of the Jewish people, the biblical ancestors, the Israelites are enslaved in Egypt for over 400 years. We'll back up a little bit. Joseph, his brothers sell him into slavery. Sell him into slavery. He gets thrown into a dungeon, right? Potiphar's dungeon. He then basically gets freed by the Pharaoh and interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. In his position, he is able to prevent Egypt from starvation and famine, and welcomes his brothers and father to Egypt, and everyone lives happily ever after in that moment. Joseph, in his role of vice pharaoh, everything's wonderful. Then he dies, and we learn at the beginning of the book of Exodus, a new king rises over Egypt who knew not Joseph. The rabbis debate whether it's a new king, a new pharaoh altogether, or a pharaoh who just acted as though he knew not Joseph. And during that period of time, for hundreds of years, it ensues that the Israelites become continually more and more oppressed. Eventually, we get to a place where the Israelites stop complaining and stop calling out to God. And it's in that moment that God swoops in and decides to hear their cry and plea and prayer and to redeem and rescue them, and does so by sending Moses and his brother Aaron to plea and petition the Pharaoh to free the Israelites. And Pharaoh refuses. In that process, there's demonstrations of miracles and signs. These are the 10 plagues. And God hardens Pharaoh's heart during that process. The 10th plague is the apex, the pinnacle. It's the death of the firstborn. Pharaoh plotted to kill Israelite firstborn, so too, or Israelite children, so too God metes out measure for measure. In that period of time, during the 10th plague, the Israelites are commanded to take a brush of hyssop and paint their doorposts with blood of the Passover sacrifice. I'm using the term Passover sacrifice so people know what I'm talking about, but it was a sacrificial lamb. And then the angel of death would not enter the Israelite homes. We'll come back to that in a moment. The Israelites, finally, Pharaoh says to the Israelites, go. They flee, they leave. They get to what people today call the Red Sea, although in Hebrew it's the Yam Suf, it's the Reed Sea, yet another typographical error or translation error in our biblical translation history. They reach the Reed Sea, the waters miraculously part, which I'm paraphrasing now, and they cross safely. The beginning of Passover, the first night of Passover, the first Seder, coincides chronologically and historically with the 10th plague that last night. And the end of Passover, the last day of Passover, coincides with the crossing of the sea, and that's the observance. And so we experience the holiday in real time as opposed to just celebrating or remembering it's an actual observance.
Okay. Wow. Phenomenal. Yeah. Thank you. So how about teasing out a little bit about how that in real time gets celebrated since
Sure.
then
So
today?
the beginning of the festival are holy days, and the end of the festival are holy days. And the middle of the holiday, those middle 4 days, if you will, is not quite a non-holiday day, but still a holiday day. And so it's not quite a holy day as in the Sabbath, but it's still a feast, if you will. And Passover is all somewhat restrictive in terms of what you can't eat and what you don't do, but also what you can do. It's a holiday where people go to synagogue daily for many. But one of the most important pieces about Passover is it's likely one of the most, observed festivals and observances in the Jewish community, if not to the letter of the law, at least in some extent, because it's so much of a home festival. It's so much of a home observance. You're not necessarily going to the synagogue for Seder. You're hosting a Seder, a Passover dinner, a Passover meal in your home.
Why is it at the home as opposed to synagogue typically? Or what's that about?
Because if you think about the actual Exodus,
Yeah,
it was because
got to be the home
right,
itself. Right.
That's right. And the home became the sacred space. It was about gathering with one's neighbors, gathering with strangers. It was gathering together as a community. And remember, Chris, Judaism in general was a religion after the 1st century. And when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in the year 70 CE, it became a religion in diaspora. Right. And so the idea of the destruction of the temple and then the evolution and the growth and the blossoming of synagogues were an epicenter for the community, but faith was still found in the home.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm just having flashbacks now as you're talking. When I was in theology in Boston, I had a course on Jewish liturgy from John Levinson.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And he invited me to the house for Passover, which was just an unbelievably privileged and actually really fun experience too. He's a total character too, but to be a part of that and the storytelling and all the vitality of it. And I don't know if you want to say anything about how it plays out.
I think what's most interesting about the Passover Seder is you could find within it that we find in all of our faith traditions elements of the non-religious or the secular world that then become reappropriated or mimicked into the religious world. How did the Seder meal and the Seder night really come about? The rabbis were hanging out and they saw their Greco-Roman neighbors and they said, they're having a fun time.
Right. I want to give a little bit of that.
Yeah, it would be really cool to lay down and recline on a triclinium, that L-shaped chase lounge, have someone, serve me wine and drink and sing and teach and tell stories and eat, right. And we would have just a grand old time. But now let's make it Jewish.
Right.
And that became the Seder.
Right.
And it became in the context of singing and teaching and drinking and playing with our food, right? There are literal courses where you serve antipasti, similar to, right, a Roman Jewish cuisine or a Roman cuisine, where, we talk about today, you dip a green vegetable, a parsley, a green herb in salt water, and they say, well, that's to remember the tears of our ancestors. Well, really, where did that come from? I don't know if you've gone to an Italian restaurant before as of late, but what do? You have a little bit of bread, some olive oil, some vinegar, you salt, you dip your vegetable, right? It's antipasti, right. And that's what it was. It was, how do we mimic what was, it was called a Greek symposium. Mm-hmm. Symposium we might use in the university setting to talk about a lecture, but a symposium was a night when they all gathered together and they drank and they ate and they taught and they sang and then they fell asleep.
Right. Yep. And it's building on that the axiom out of the Catholic tradition that grace builds on nature, or we all of our holidays are the same kind of reality, right? That builds on the human experience, and then the sacred builds on that, but it's all kind of seamlessly brought up together in that celebration. So,
That's right. And when we think about some of the rituals of our religious festivals, some of them we've made holy.
mhm.
Others we allow it to happen and they're tandem. But think about it, right? Let's talk about, we're talking about Passover and the parallel, the Easter egg.
Right.
Okay. Where did bunnies and Easter eggs come from? Well, all of a sudden we start talking about life and
Mhm.
resurrection and the sanctity of life. And this symbol that likely had nothing to do with Catholicism or Christianity now becomes a Christian symbol. And
Right.
there's an egg also on the Seder plate,
Mhm.
right? There's a roasted egg on the Seder plate that has to do with life and sacrifice and humanity and the circle of life and ritual and even death. And
Yeah.
so there's that balance. Or where does the Christmas tree come from? We know that's not in the Christian Catholic tradition,
Right. Yeah.
right? And how does Hanukkah become a festival of light?
Right.
Also, light in this season, it's borrowed from the world around us and it becomes part of our religious tradition.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, I think we could probably go on for a couple hours here, but we might want to.
Sure.
I want to be mindful of people's attention span for these little moments.
Sure.
They're so fun. How about a little something about what is it that's going on with the celebrations interiorly, spiritually? What is the goal, and what is
Yeah.
the process, and what is God doing in the midst of these celebrations to the human heart?
So I think that the lead up to Passover is as important as Passover itself.
Mhm.
And the lead up to Passover is about cleaning. We clean our homes, we turn over our dishes, and we really clean. This is where spring cleaning actually comes from.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
it's from the cleaning for Passover.
Oh,
And but it's not only physically cleaning our homes, it's also cleaning our hearts and our souls. It's how do we eliminate arrogance from our hearts? Because if you remember, what is matzah? Matzah is unrisen bread. How do we eliminate leaven from our life?
yeah.
And then we spend Passover resetting and restarting. And how do we enter life anew as not a lowly individual, but one who feels as though they've just had to leave everything behind?
Yeah.
And how do we make that march and that walk over the next 7 weeks to Sinai? Right?
Yeah.
How do we prepare for that ascent? What are those gates of spiritual impurity that we have to cross through? And how do we commune with God in the process to learn more about ourselves, our people, and our Creator?
Yeah. That's great. Like always another new chance to start over, to empty out, to realize our hunger for God and our reliance
That's right.
on God, and to
That's
have
right.
start
Right.
into freedom ultimately, where true
And
freedom.
what I would also add, Chris, is the chief commandment or the chief observance of the Passover holiday. Yes, it's about not eating leavened products, and yes, it's about eating matzah. But at the end of the day, it's what we call v'yigadata levincha, and you should tell the story to your child.
Mm, yeah.
But it's actually telling the story. It doesn't even have to be like it, the rabbis even teach. If you don't have a child and you're sitting alone, then you have to read this out loud to yourself.
Yeah.
But Moses isn't even mentioned in the Haggadah, in the Seder prayer book.
Mm.
And so it's not about reading the story literally verbatim from the Bible.
Mhm.
It's how have I come to assimilate and interpret the narrative of the people, and how do I convey that to everyone else?
Yeah.
Which means if I'm sitting at my Seder table having a feast of freedom, and there are others in the world that are enslaved, then I darn well better wake up the next morning and figure out how to fight for their freedom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how we internalize and assimilate the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. It starts with that introspection, but then it always leads out to
That's right.
your eyes to the needs of the world. What a great poignant place to maybe
Sure.
conclude for this time. And we can, this is
And
just
that,
so rich.
but But that's the message, right? That's the mission of the University of St. Thomas, advance for the common good, right? That's what we have to do.
Got to have that interior conversion in all kinds of different ways, and then always be keeping our eyes open to the needs in the world for our brothers and sisters. So
that's right.
I mean, this is just phenomenal. I love these chats. So thanks so much for taking time here. And any last little words for us for the
No, just that this is a unique year when Ramadan, Easter, and Passover coincide. So we should all have a blessed holy day season, and we should look to each other for that love and that hope.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, and we'll see you
All right, we'll talk soon.
Take care, everybody.